everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to transform their leadership, create more resilience, and generate more balance in their life. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Teslaw, and I'm a full-time lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm glad you're with us today. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at The Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure to join our Facebook group. Just search The Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and a weekly email from me on things you need to know about. I also send out content that's exclusive to that list, so don't miss out on something that can help you in your life or in your job. Join our list at thesquadroom.net. You know, whether you're the chief, a sergeant, a patrol officer, or anyone in between, one of the most time-consuming and frustrating parts of managing people is dealing with the schedule. From shift bids to overtime and special events, vacation requests, court overtime, and unexpected critical incidents and major disasters, the schedule is like a living, breathing beast that must be wrestled with at every level of an agency. If your agency is still living in the dark ages, running off an Excel spreadsheet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's why I'm so impressed with InTime. InTime is designed specifically for public safety agencies, from police and sheriff's offices to corrections, dispatch, and fire agencies. Their cloud-based system and their smartphone app allow officers to access the system from anywhere to sign up for overtime, submit vacation requests, and get updated on court subpoenas. Their system is incredibly easy to use and only takes a few minutes, not hours, to understand and begin using. Major agencies like the Anaheim Police Department, Pittsburgh Police, Passaic County Sheriff's Office, CAL FIRE, and many others trust InTime to save them time and money. If you're interested in spending less time on scheduling, eliminating redundant and expensive overtime, increasing your compliance with subpoenas, and reducing the stress and fatigue on your employees, please, I beg of you, go to intime.com/thesquadroom to learn more about their system. This episode is sponsored by officerprivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is, people can do that research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find, even the bad guys. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. Sometimes that's literal and it's life or death, and other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to these risks. Being careful about what you post on social media doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why officerprivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down the criminals and evidence on the computers and the internet that we now use. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 50 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they will remove you again. They also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and the technical ability to do it yourself. I don't, so that's why I use their premium service, but you can do it all yourself using their proprietary software. You can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 50 people search sites on the internet, and then use the software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure that you haven't been added back. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/thesquadroom. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/thesquadroom. Olivia Mead from Yoga for First Responders. Welcome to the Squad Room. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
We're going to break down some stigmas today, I imagine. Probably like part of your full-time job at this point.
Exactly. It's 90% of my job.
90% of your job is convincing people that this isn't necessarily woo. So before we jump into why any first responder, for me, particularly cops, should be looking at yoga as a methodology for all the things we'll jump into, why don't you tell people about you and your organization and how you came about into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been practicing yoga nearly my entire life, teaching yoga for about 20 years now. I started to move into teach exclusively to military and veterans and then public safety from there because I wasn't happy about how yoga was being taught in the West, to be perfectly honest. It has turned into a trend. It has been stigmatized, like we were just talking about. And the whole reason behind that is to make money. And
Mm.
because money is being made, yoga is $1 billion business in the West. Things aren't going to be changing soon. They're selling yoga pants for $125 a pop. There are these trendy yoga studios. And, I know that a lot of people are enjoying those and getting something out of it. So I don't want to necessarily knock that. But the real authentic practice of yoga, purpose of yoga, and benefits gets lost when we sort of move into that egocentric, trendy type of yoga that we're seeing in the West. And I really wanted to bring it back to its traditional roots, which is how I was taught and how I practice. And also I wanted to teach a population who really need that, who really need the benefit of that, and who would also appreciate the original discipline that yoga requires. And the first thing that came to mind was around 2012 was veterans. We were hearing a lot about veteran suicide, and I was like, God, there's this huge, need in military and veteran population, and the original intention of yoga answers that need. So I got trained specifically to teach yoga to veterans who struggle with post-traumatic stress, did that. And then it occurred to me that public safety is experiencing very similar statistics of stress-based health issues. And they're in the fight every day. When I was working with veterans, they were coming back from deployment, or they, are no longer active duty. So they did their thing and they came back. And with public safety, you're out in the fight every single day. And the worst part is you don't know what that war is going to look like that day. It could be quiet, it could not be, it could be life or death, it could not be. Just that in and of itself is very strenuous on the nervous system. And I was also at fault of this, but um, a lot of us just assume and know that when we call 911, someone will be there without thinking, gosh, maybe we should give the people who are showing up the support they need to be sustainable in this really high stress career.
Mm-hmm.
I Googled the words yoga for first responders, like I had Googled the year before yoga for veterans, yoga for military. And there are so many great yoga trainings to specifically teach the population of military and veterans. But nothing came up when I Googled yoga for first responders. And
Mm.
instead of being like, well, never mind, it felt like a responsibility. It felt like an assignment. Like, this is now yours, to create.
Mm-hmm.
So my next move was Googling an email address at Los Angeles Fire Department. I was living in LA. And I happened to get a hold of the right person as the head psychologist. And he gave me a shot. It was kind of as crazy as it sounds. That first um, opportunity with Los Angeles Fire Department was the easiest one. He was just like, yes, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I learned a lot. I was offering them yoga the same way I was offering yoga to veterans, and it wasn't the right fit. So I had to learn a lot about public safety to tailor the yoga specifically to their needs. And what's funny is the more I was tailoring it to their needs, the more it was actually being taken back to the traditional practice. And all the BS of the West was sort of getting dropped. Then LAPD sort of heard what was happening, asked me to come in for their wellness day, got connected with them. So started teaching for law enforcement. What I started to do over those first few years was spend time there, ask a lot of questions, do ride-alongs. I was even invited when I moved to Iowa to attend a police and fire academy because they were just small academies, especially the fire one. And I got to be in it. So I got some really amazing light bulb moments I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and
Mm.
got to tailor the delivery of our yoga protocol even more for job specific application. And I think that's really where things started to change was, um, people started to practice it and realize the benefit off duty and on duty too. So anyway, point is that there started to be so much demand for this because there's a huge missing skill set in public safety when you get trained, and that's long-term survivability basically.
Yeah.
And this was answering that need, and I got really busy. So I stopped teaching at public studios and gyms and was exclusively teaching for public safety at that point.
So what was the what provoked the interest in the first place and the empathy towards this particular community, because it's not a natural community that a lot of people gravitate towards? Do you have a family in law enforcement or a history in law enforcement or anything like that?
I get asked that a lot. And, I do have a cousin in law enforcement that didn't have anything to do with it. And I kind of had to self, psychoanalyze
Mhm.
myself to be like, yeah, why, Um, and because it did seem sort of natural for me and gravitating towards it. I think there's a couple things. One is the way I was educated in my life was with a lot of discipline and structure. I went to a boarding school for classical ballet, which
Mm.
is actually extremely hardcore and
Yeah.
disciplined. And so that, and the way I was trained in yoga as well. I went to India. They do not mess around there. If you are not on time, on your mat, ready to go, you are locked out of the room. It's purposeful, it's for mental discipline. And so I think that's why I'm naturally drawn towards other populations who are based in discipline and structure as well.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. And that's the way I teach yoga. I don't teach yoga softy wafty. I never have, even before I taught military and public safety. I am direct. I challenge my students, and not everyone is prepared to be challenged. And so I think I was drawn towards the population who thrive in that environment, one. Two, so basically, after being asked this same question and having people know my story, um, one of the things that may have contributed to it was that I was living in New York City at the time of 9/11 and went to school right next to a firehouse, and knew those guys, walked past them every day of my school life. And after, then they were gone after, a lot of the people that gave me patches and would high five, they were gone.
Mm.
And um, just being in that city during that time, and all the first responders that helped and stepped up and did their work, I think somehow a seed was planted of just an enormous amount of respect and gratitude, and maybe this is how it manifested.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, if you're going to go teach yoga to people, there is not a harder group to swing to your side than military and first responders
Oh,
who,
100%. That's why
yeah,
it's not a lot of people are doing it. they, they try and then they stop, because it is easier to walk into a yoga studio and be praised for your sweet playlist.
right.
It's tough. It is challenging, but I love changing minds
So
too.
one of the things out, maybe you're going to break on one of my own misconceptions of it now, but you've referred to it several times as like the traditional model, or you're kind of the anti-Western model of yoga. And to me, and I practice yoga, I've used it to rehab injuries, and at times
Mhm.
I've been more dedicated to it as an activation of the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, that sort of stuff. But um, that to me is more the Western use of it, where you kind of have removed the spiritual part of it, or that sort of, that's my belief anyway. But what is it about the West versus traditional model, and why do you think the traditional model is the way to go for first responders?
Yeah, so I would say if I were to sum it up or generalize it, the Western model is more focused on the physical aspect of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the traditional model is for the purposes of mastering the mind and optimizing functioning of your entire psychophysiological system. It's to create an elite edge. Yoga was created for the warrior class to have an edge over the opponent. Mentally stronger, physically stronger, yes, neurologically stronger. And it's the subtle body. So the subtle body, the brain, the nervous system, the things that you can't see or touch or are tangible, which is a lot more difficult to train
Mm-hmm.
because you can't see it. You can see your physical body in the mirror. You can measure how fast it takes you to run a mile and how much weight you can lift. So that's super easy to train for and get really into. But when I start talking about brain waves, heart rate variability, nervous system regulation, that's a lot trickier for someone to understand and be committed to train. Yet it is the most powerful tool anyone has. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care if you're an elite marksman. If you are injured on the mental, neurological level, you are not out in the field using those skills. So it doesn't matter. You have to, there is no training. There is no training for the mental or neurological aspect. True training. There's some great organizations that love to raise awareness, which is like my pet peeve. You raise awareness. We're aware. We're aware. There needs to be a tactical training for the mental and neurological system. And that is the original intention of yoga. The physical aspect is part of the whole system of yoga for several different reasons. Yes, strength and functional mobility, of course, but also how you move the body with the specificity, how, like the precision of how you move the body is actually connecting to the prefrontal cortex. And so that's why when I teach, I care about where your pinky finger is. And it's annoying when the teacher is like, hey, what's going on with your knee? What's going on with your toes? But what's happening is I'm forcing you to use the prefrontal cortex to make a connection with your body. If we don't do that, then it's easier for the amygdala to hijack your decisions. And that's when we start seeing bad things happen in high stress situations. When the prefrontal cortex is dulled, and it's dulled by cumulative stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not just talking about the critical incidents here. I'm actually talking about putting on a uniform engages the nervous system.
Sure.
So just that is like a tiny little, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's a tiny little thing, tiny little tap. And those things aren't being addressed, but it's dulling your capacity to be able to make correct decisions under stress.
Mm-hmm.
And we start seeing bad things happening in terms of performance, and then also in that person's life, right?
Sure.
And so there has to be a tactical training for that. That's the long-term survivability. So that is, and moving the body processes stress hormones, and there's so many benefits to the physical practice. So it's not that we don't do the physical practice. Believe me, we kick some butt, but it's for a different reason. It's not for the six pack and the cute butt in the yoga pants. It's because we're using the physical body as the vehicle to enter into our system and train what's inside here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the yoga masters calls it cleaning the windows. Like if this is your house, yoga is cleaning the windows of your house so you can see clearly out into the world. And so that doesn't sell, though. If I put up a poster and a flyer for a yoga studio and it was like, make better decisions under stress, sleep better, have better performance at work, no one would come to my yoga studio. But
Right.
if I was like, cute butt and yoga pants, we get you, hot. I love hot yoga, by the way, so I'm not knocking hot yoga, but it's like, we'll get you sweaty with hot yoga and this and that. We put sexy people on the flyer. That would sell tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So of course that's what everyone's going to default to. But the traditional yoga is about what's up in your head.
Mm-hmm. I want to clarify a few things for people real quick, just so they understand where this path we're taking. Uh, when you mentioned the amygdala, which is basically our fight or flight center of our brain, and I'm paraphrasing lots of
Yeah.
nuance here, but it's our center where we identify threats, where we interpret threats, and then we react to those threats. And so when you say that the amygdala fires up, that's where all of our stress and our adrenaline hormones come from and get dumped into our system. Then you mentioned the prefrontal cortex, which is our judgment center of our brain, which, if the amygdala is like the gas pedal on our emotions and on our actions, the prefrontal cortex is more like the brake. We can pump the brakes, we can slow down, we can make judgment decisions
Steering wheel.
about what to
Yeah.
do. So I just want to kind of frame that for people, because
Yeah.
I'm curious how you look at yoga and you think of it as a stretching routine, and there's certainly discipline about maintaining the postures and the poses, but what is it physiologically that provokes that shift from using the amygdala to react to using the prefrontal cortex to respond?
Right. Love that. Love that react and respond thing. And I actually, for a metaphor, I always talk about the amygdala as the Incredible Hulk and the prefrontal cortex as Bruce Banner.
I like
So,
that. Yeah, that's great.
because, because the thing is the amygdala is trying to protect you, right? It's fear-based trying to protect you,
Right.
but it doesn't always make the right decisions. It's just throwing punches,
Yeah.
you know? And it may not be throwing a punch at the right person because
Right.
it's just freaking out.
Mhm.
So we do need them to work together. Um, so yeah. So like I said before, when I'll give you an example that I see a lot. If I ask someone to stand in mountain pose, and mountain pose you can think of like readiness, preparedness. It's not just standing there; it's ready for training.
Right.
I'm squeezing my shoulder blades. My feet are at 12 o'clock. I keep my fingers bladed, right? And I'm moving into my foundational tactical breathwork technique, which is 3-part breath. So you're in it, you're in training.
Mhm.
I see a lot of this. I rubbing the eyebrow, looking at the clock, fixing the shirt, fidgeting. And that is showing an undisciplined mind. You can't even stand still and focus on your breathing. It's very common.
Mhm.
And I point this out to people because it requires the prefrontal cortex to scan the body and put it in the position I'm asking you to put it in without this unconscious habit of fidgeting. So, one of the tools I created to train to train the prefrontal cortex to be in the driver's seat, is what I call the 3 Ps. Be precise in the position of your body. So if you're not looking down, this happens. Another thing, I say toes 12 o'clock, toes 12 o'clock. Don't look at them though. And someone's sitting there with their toes at 10 and 2. I'm literally saying toes at 12 o'clock. There is a lack of communication because they think they're doing it,
Mhm.
but they're not. So we have to strengthen the prefrontal cortex to be able to connect to the body. So it's training the prefrontal cortex to be stronger and stronger. You can actually grow gray matter. You can grow gray matter, neuroplasticity, new neural pathways, which are new behaviors in the brain, if you do these subtle practices. So what we're trying to do is strengthen the prefrontal cortex. So when those high stress situations come up, it takes the driver's seat instead of the amygdala.
Mhm.
So, so the 3 Ps: position. So precise position of your body, pace of your breathing. So this is really key, the pace of your breathing, because your breathing, your breath is informative. It's indicative of what everything else that's happening is,
Mhm.
how your breath is responding. And then third is your perception, your mind. So You can look at stress as either a threat or a challenge. Threat amygdala, challenge prefrontal cortex.
Hmm.
Think of public speaking. A lot of people freak out, right? And they get that amygdala hijack and they freeze, they sweat, they can't perform because their brain is perceiving the audience as a threat, like they're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do practices, which we incorporate cognitive behavioral techniques, etc., to be able to switch gears into challenge mode, then the stress is still there. The heart's still going. You're still nervous, but you're able to stay present and actually do your job.
Mm-hmm.
So, if so, those are the three areas that we do have control over, but you have to be trained. You can't just say, "Hey, don't forget to breathe. Take a deep breath, man." It's not about that. It's true training. Training the body, training the breath, and training the mind. And all of those things are going to increase the neural pathways in the brain and gray matter in the prefrontal cortex to be able to perform under pressure.
You know, after the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact there's so much of my life that is out there accessible to the public. And yes, I know that I'm a public figure in some sort of way, but even then, it still makes me uncomfortable. And I've been trying to figure out where the line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast or on social media or in interviews I give and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think that my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house, 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough of worrying about it and felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seems insurmountable, and I learned that honestly, it is. But there's a lot that we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at officerprivacy.com, who are helping me to clean up my side of the internet. A quick Google search shows just a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. To learn more about how they can keep you safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. Now, you mentioned performing under pressure. How in like, can you give us an example perhaps of how yoga will make someone safer on patrol, for example? Like
Yeah,
how does that work?
yeah, I would say awareness.
Okay.
Um, so whatever how you train on the yoga mat is how you're going to perform in life. It seems trivial, it seems not true, but when I get people on the yoga mat, I can tell exactly who you are and how you do things by how you approach the yoga. Your attitude, your body, your breath, your commitment, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can train yourself so the yoga mat is a safe, contained environment where we can create stress for you. The stress comes through the discipline of the practice, maybe some pressure from the instructor, the stress of the actual physical practice and the challenges of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're creating this stress so you have a safe and contained environment to practice responding under stress. The 3 Ps: position, pace, perception. And when you practice it, awareness, mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is a skill that does improve with training. It's also perishable, just like
Oh yeah.
resilience. So it must be trained ahead of time. It doesn't just happen. And so there's a lot of talk about resilience and mindfulness. It doesn't just apply, like you have to train for it like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And the yoga mat is that training ground. So for instance, I'll have someone hold a plank, let's say a plank or a low plank. their body starts to tremble and shake. And at this point, I'm coaching them in the 3 Ps because this is what happens. They'll start to tremble and shake. And stress is stress is stress. You don't know. The body's like, I'm under stress. I don't know if I'm on the yoga mat or if someone's pointing a gun at me. The same things are happening. Mm-hmm. So they're trembling. So I say, okay, what happens normally is their hands, they start to lose control of their hands. They look down. Always. They start to look down. And they start to compromise the integrity of the position. How does this translate out into the field? You're tremoring, something's going on, whatever the case may be. You start to lose your dexterity, your fine motor skills. If you lose it on the yoga mat, you're going to lose it out there. You're supposed to be grabbing for tools. You're supposed to have proprioception. If you are not able to have proprioception on a yoga mat, how are you supposed to have it out in the field? How are you supposed to be able to unholster a weapon in the most efficient way when you're tremoring? Mm-hmm. Second thing is breath. Another thing with position work too is adrenaline will get you through stuff physically, and then you might be on disability the next day. So you need to have a functioning tool here to be able to do whatever is asked of you in that moment. Mm-hmm. Breath. If your breath is compromised, that's what's going to signal to the brain a threat, go back into the amygdala, and maybe make poor decisions. So the breath is compromised. Same thing and that affects the perception of the situation, being in control mm-hmm. or not of mm-hmm. the situation. This all comes back to this plank pose. So what I train everyone in is, okay, 3 Ps. You're tremoring. You hate this. You don't want to be here. You can either hold your breath, lock your jaw, lose your dexterity, and lose your eye contact with the threat, like this. Happens all the time. And you've just trained yourself on how you're going to handle stress out there. Or we work on blading the fingers, pressing down on each finger pad, scooting the shoulders back, 3-part breath. Keep your eye on the threat, no matter how much you're tremoring, no matter how much, this is uncomfortable. My eyes are on the threat. It's not going to leave the threat. I can tap on my trigger finger. I know where it is without looking, all while my body's tremoring. And then after that's activation. Immediately, I'll put them into regulation. I'll put them into a fascia release pose, which releases the stress hormones. Get them into some tactical breath work that regulates the nervous system. So what we're training is activation, regulation, activation, regulation. A well-trained nervous system isn't just one that knows how to go down into homeostasis. A well-trained nervous system also knows how to be in high stress effectively, and that is not being trained. So then when it goes out to the field, and this is based on true testimonials, I should probably pull one up here for you. We've had several people say when they had to use deadly force or the threat of it, mm-hmm. They realized later, again, you're somewhere else. I'm not asking you to be like yoga, like while you're in that situation. If you've trained for it, it happens automatically. They noticed that they immediately went into 3-part breath because they trained for it already. Mm-hmm. They immediately got into their breath. They immediately were aware of their position work. They were immediately able to practice the mindfulness, the intention, the action, the awareness of mindfulness. It happened automatically. Mm-hmm. So instead of going into tunnel vision and having another part of your brain take over where you don't even remember what happened, because that's common, you are in control. Still using the part of the stress response that we need, adrenaline, cortisol, you need that. It's a life, it makes us powerhouses. You need that stuff. You just need it in combination with mindfulness. And we've had several people say that, oh my God, I was in a standoff from Wednesday to Thursday, and I was using my breath work the whole time to stay present and to stay in control. And then when I went home, I had the techniques to regulate myself back down so I could be with my family and do my job the best to my ability the following day too.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
You don't want one critical incident to happen. That's the highlight of your career. And then you got to go, you know?
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting too. I never thought of it as we talk about stress inoculation training all the time, and we think of it in terms of using simulation rounds or paintball or, force on force training, that sort of thing. I'd never thought of yoga or even mindfulness as stress inoculation training, but I suppose it's actually quite accurate. And it's funny, as you were mentioning breath work and being a perishable skill and all those things. It just triggered something from even just yesterday for me, as I was kind of having a rough day, and nothing was going right, and was kind of feeling that sense of getting spun up. But then I realized, as I was driving at the time, I realized I was doing my breaths, doing breathing. And I hadn't even instinctively or intentionally started that. It was just something that I moved into. And
Mhm.
that's probably what provoked the realization at the moment, like, oh, this is kind of a rough day. But it was
Mhm.
because of the
Mhm.
breath work and that I was going into, and I talked myself out of the tree with that.
It's informative, right? The breath is indicative of something. You're like, "Oh, okay." And then you can control your breath to control everything else. The breath is the tunnel to put your hands on the levers and buttons of your own nervous system,
Hmm.
like you just said. Because someone could notice they're getting spun up and not have the tools to do anything about it
Yeah.
either. And we actually there was something else I was going to say about. Oh yes, yeah. So you mentioned different simulations for stress. Well, I like to call yoga the training for the training, because when you do those simulations, you're still under stress and you're still not being taught what to do about it, you know? So, what if we trained ahead of time for the training so
Hmm.
you could actually apply the skills of mindfulness and regulation for the training for then going to work?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Um, like for instance, I attended this psychology of shooting or some, I forgot what it was called, at a conference, and they were talking about this study they did with teaching firearms. And one group was taught techniques on like a SIRT pistol, so there wasn't the bang bang and there wasn't the flinch,
Hmm.
right? And then the other group was taught with true, firearms right away, with the flinch, with the bang bang, all that stuff. And then they took both groups and brought them out to the range to start working. And at first, the group that was practicing with the SIRT pistols, their accuracy and performance went down at first and then shot up as compared to the other group. And the reason for that is they had trained their techniques so heavily before the inevitable flinch that once they got over the flinch, the strong technique was still there.
Hmm.
Whereas the group that always had to go through the bang bang part never really got to work on the technique because they were always wrapped around that flinch,
Hmm.
right? So that's what I kind of compare it to. It's like with yoga, we don't, no one's coming after you. We're not doing the simulation. We're just working on these tiny details of, can I inhale? And this is so small, but
Hmm.
you'd be shocked at how many people can't do it. Can I inhale and isolate my trigger finger and exhale and press it down while I'm in a plank pose, while I'm under, another form of stress?
Hmm.
Inhale, exhale. And then when you go to the simulation training, you're already trained in that kind of specificity. So the simulation training is going to be even more effective. Um, and I used to call it stress inoculation, and I know that's a popular way to say it. I'll tell you why I started calling it processing stress, or stress regulation, or stress processing instead.
Hmm.
Because inoculation infers that we're going to be free from it,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Right.
Vaccination, you won't have it, you know? But we need stress. Stress is not the enemy. I am not going to show up relaxed to, uh, to a life or death situation. To, uh, we need stress to make us superhuman, to make us focused.
Mm-hmm.
But stress is a tool. It's like a little pet. You got to train it. So instead of inoculating the stress as if it's bad,
Mm-hmm.
let's process it so it's ready to go. Because when you process stress, what it turns into is resilience. That's where resilience comes from, is stress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No one is resilient who hasn't gone through the fire.
Sure.
You know, you have to walk through the fire to get to the other side. So stress can go one of two ways. If you don't have the tools to process it, it goes to depletion and you get knocked down, 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 down. Or you know how to process stress and it makes you better, 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 better. So that's why I just sort of changed that wording and how I deliver the training so people understand that we work with stress. We don't eliminate it.
All right. So the most important question I have for you today is, who's better at it, firefighters or cops?
Good question. That's a very good question. And my husband's a firefighter, so
Oh,
I'm
well, see, you're biased here.
well, I know, so I have to, you know, um, I have to tell you though, the incredible amount of, I don't know how to call it, but there's a lot of gratitude that we're getting
Mm.
from
Mhm.
cops, from firefighters, from dispatchers, from paramedics who, I'll tell you a story about one of our instructors who's a firefighter, and he has been teaching his crew. He's a captain, and at their dinner, they say a prayer at dinner, and a guy contributed to the prayer that he was so thankful he had this new tool, and man, that makes me get up and do that hard work every day.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I've had tier one military operators on the show talking about the benefits of mindfulness, meditation, yoga. I've had Wendy Hummel, who is,
Oh,
uh,
I know Wendy. She's
yeah,
one of our instructors.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wendy's to come on, and we've talked about it. And I've talked about it again from just physically healing and getting through those modalities. But I've never really tackled the stress processing part of it, at least on the show. I've definitely felt it, and when I'm in a good practice with it, I definitely feel the benefits of being calmer, processing inputs a lot better, responding instead of reacting, both to
Mhm.
my kids, my wife, things at work.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm a believer, and I wanted to have you on today to, kind of break down some of those misconceptions about what people think. And it's not I mean, it can be, but it's not always the going into the core power and doing the set with a cool playlist, which I think is still beneficial. Like if that's all you have, then it's
Right.
better than nothing. Or the Peloton app or something, like
Right.
any of those things are going to challenge you. And I'm not a small guy, and I'm also not a limber guy, so it doesn't take much to challenge me when it comes to yoga. It doesn't have to be very complicated for me to be at
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
max. But I think it's a valuable tool for people to consider putting in their toolkit. If they want to learn more about you and your organization and what you do for first responders, where can they find you?
So you can just go to yogaforfirstresponders.org, all spelled out. That's our website. Same thing for all social media at Yoga for First Responders. We have instructor schools where we train you to instruct this for your agency or other agencies. No experience necessary. In fact, if you are a blank slate, even better. We love that even better because we have to unteach things, that you've learned. So don't worry about that. So we have instructor schools coming up. Our next one is in West Palm Beach, Florida in February with a police department. And I can't remember which one right now, but it's on our website. And, if anyone's like, okay, fine, I want to start this now, you've convinced me, we have online learning, and I really encourage people to try that out because we did a research study with our 6-week online program, and the results showed a significant decrease in stress symptoms
Mm-hmm.
and an increase in the mindset of stress, like an enhanced mindset of stress,
Sure.
after the 6-week online program.
Great.
And so if you go on our website, YFFR University's, the online courses, you'll see that 6-week course. Cyber Academy is our app. There are free training videos on there. So just look at your app store, look up YFFR or Cyber Academy, it'll come up. And start doing it now. We have such short training videos on there that like don't tell me there isn't time, because I know that you go to the bathroom for like 10 minutes. You could like sit and listen to a recording then.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no excuses.
Right.
Start this now, commit to some time with it, and start noting the difference. And, and if you need more guidance, info@yogaforfirstresponders.org, and we'll figure it out, because our mission, we're a nonprofit, and our mission is to get this tool into the hands of public safety. So whatever we need to do, we'll make it happen for you.
We'll put all those links in the show notes too. So if you're listening to this episode, just scroll through those and you can find the links, and you can connect up with Olivia and her team at Yoga for First Responders. Thanks for being here. Super interesting stuff. Makes me want to dive back into my practice, which I've let lapse over the last couple months. And so gave me some new ideas on how to think of it as part of my tactical training moving forward.
Yeah.
So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're new to the show, make sure you check through our catalog of episodes, because you're going to find some amazing guests and some great actionable ideas you can take into your day. Also, I want to offer you something I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. It's my Tactical Tuesday newsletter. Every Tuesday, I want to bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be a book I want to share, some gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there. And I promise we won't sell or spam your email address. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, if you were inspired by our conversation today, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends, people who you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend that they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. If you have a few seconds, please leave a comment with your review, because it really helps us spread the word about the show, and it helps more cops find the valuable lessons that we have here. Also, join us on Facebook at our Facebook group, follow our page, and on Instagram at The Squad Room. A special thanks to today's sponsor, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important, check them out at OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room, where their deal for you as a listener of this show is they'll give you a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, InTime. InTime is the state-of-the-art, easy-to-use, and incredibly simple way to schedule shifts, improve subpoena compliance, reduce officer fatigue, and manage special events, and much more. Make sure to check them out at intime.com/The Squad Room to learn more about their affordable and simple solutions for public safety. Also, there are some other great companies who support the podcast and support you as well. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, Ranger Up, Hardhead Veterans, and Audible. And if you're looking for the best-fitting ballistic helmet that exceeds NIJ standards and won't break the bank, check out hardheadveterans.com and use the coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your helmet. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.